In India, there are a lot of different layers and a lot of different socio-economic backgrounds in India itself. So a lot of individuals do have to give up their education because their families can't afford to send them to school, but they are very talented and they get into sport, and that's what they sometimes become the sole breadwinners of their family. And that's where I talk about sport has the power to change lives. And I've seen individuals who I've worked with where families could not put one meal on the table, but their kids went out there and started to perform at a certain level. And today they've changed their whole family's lives and generations to come. The sport does have the power to change lives. And I see that in India for sure. When you can't put one meal on the table, that is pressure. And they've seen their families suffer. So to go out there and actually run and perform and play football or go out there and play a sport, that is fun for them. That is joy for them. That brings so much happiness to them. You see the drive, the love for the sport. And that is fun. That is their happy space, is what I've seen in a lot of communities. Talent is just the sole reason for success. I think there's a lot of barriers that are involved. I'll take an example of an Indian footballer, one of the best that our country has produced. His name is Sunil Chhetri. And he got a contract with QPR. And he was due to play in London at that time. But unfortunately, due to policies and procedures, he did not get the work permit to actually go out there and play. So that brings me back to the point that talent is there. There is enough to actually go out there and perform. But sometimes the policies, the procedures, the government rulings, the FIFA rulings do not permit certain individuals and athletes to actually go out there and perform at their peak and perform at the best of the environments. So this is something that I've seen not only in football, but in a lot of different sports, that their access is not the same for every individual.
Welcome to another episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness Podcast, episode 292 to be exact, in the second part of my chat with my guest, Gayatri Bhushan. And in this episode, we continue to explore the importance of being curious about the experiences of others in sport. Gayatri goes on to share further insights from India and the Middle East, where cultural, social, and gender barriers can put limits on opportunities for some people. Here's the continuation of last week's episode. While we're on the topic of belonging, I'm intrigued. Out in India, is the Premier League football, is that seen as a big thing? And if it is, are you able to just share examples of belonging to certain clubs, and then again, how that makes fans feel?
Huge in football. Premier League is huge over here. Going back to a personal story, when I got a job with one of the best clubs, Premier League clubs in the world. And I remember how funny it was in my family, because my cousins and my siblings, they were like, how can you work for that specific club? We don't support that club. And it was such a funny feeling, because I'm like, my career is not going to be dependent on the clubs that you support. But it's actually such a feeling of just love and passion and drive that individuals feel when it comes to seeing football and their favorite football players in the Premier League and watching the games. I think it's huge. It's huge in India. It's huge all over the world. And you just feel such a connect, and just a feeling of just being part of that whole environment is so huge over here in India. So yeah, it's football is big over here.
It's interesting because I think about football, so I don't often voice this one, but I am a Newcastle fan. And for many years, Newcastle been terrible. I haven't been a very well-run club. And I never, for about 20 years, I don't think I purchased the jersey, the strip. Recently, in the last few years, I've got the jersey again, and it's amazing how, I don't know, your own club or the feeling you get when something's going well, or when you just have that sense of belonging, when you've got that sense of pride in something, and the energy and the buzz you get. So we probably have to flip that, though, to the negative side, though, when you're not getting that. I don't know how negative an experience it can be. So yeah, I'm curious. Let's talk about maybe in India and in the Middle East, the types of things that people might be coming across on a day-to-day basis in sport. Have you got any examples you could share?
Yeah, I think the cases that I see in India, I think the conversation is much more complex about sport. And in India, there's a lot of layers to actually be an athlete. I think there are a lot of layers there involved. You talk about the class dynamics, you talk about where you come from, the socio-economic background. You even have access to purchase a pair of shoes to go out there and run. So there's a lot of layers that are involved over here. The gender aspect of things, it's still very, very tough for women to go out there and actually perform at the level that that they want to perform at, whether in the Middle East, whether in India. It's navigating safety, it's navigating permissions, it's navigating actually being taken seriously. And I think there's a huge gap between access. The Middle East has a lot of access now. There's a lot of investment involved. I think football is huge and it's going to be the next big hub of football. I think the Middle East is really growing. But there's still a huge gap between access and acceptance is what I see. I would say there's a lot of progress that's been made for sure, 100% credit where due. But still, I still see a gap between access and acceptance. And that is something that we still need to navigate.
Just share a little bit more about that. What exactly do you mean by the acceptance piece there?
I think there's still a lot of cultural aspects. There'll be still a lot of gender norms. There'll be still a lot of rules and regulations that maybe a certain sector has to follow to actually get access to being an athlete or being a sports person. It might come a lot easier to say a certain gender or a certain class or a certain religion. It might come more easily too. So I think there are a lot of layers that are involved before you actually get access to being where you want to be.
So I guess what you're saying there is people aren't really treated as individuals, as a person in some ways, whether if people are still, well, decision makers are still very easy just to put a label up and be quite judgmental about you. And then as a result, well, you lack the opportunities essentially to be able to play sport or coach sport or whatever it is. So in terms of the policies in place to ensure fairness and equality in sports, what do you think could be done across various different cultures? And I don't know, do you want to talk about success stories that you might have seen as well in the mix?
Oh, I would also want to mention a short story when I talk about policies and I talk about procedures. This might not be a very positive story, like you said, but when I talk about sport and I talk about talent, I don't think talent is just the sole reason for success. I think there's a lot of barriers that are involved. I'll take an example of an Indian footballer, one of the best that our country has produced. His name is Sunil Chhetri, and he got a contract with QPR, and he was due to play in London at that time. But unfortunately, due to policies and procedures, he did not get the work permit to actually go out there and play. So that brings me back to the point that talent is there. There is enough to actually go out there and perform. But sometimes the policies, the procedures, the government rulings, the FIFA rulings do not permit certain individuals and athletes to actually go out there and perform at their peak and perform at the best of the environments. So this is something that I've seen not only in football, but in a lot of different sports, that their access is not the same for every individual. And there have to be policies and procedures that need to be put in place to ensure more equality, more equity in spaces and more inclusion for the different kind of individuals and the diversities and the different populations that actually contribute to sport being such a beautiful part of people's lives.
Because I can only really comment so much on the UK. And I think over the last 5 or 10 years, there's been like a lot of progress in terms of with certain governing bodies anyway, where they've got quite a few like educational programs that are doing their utmost to be able to help coaches recognize and understand like some of these challenges and difficulties, and athletes, parents, decision makers. Does that differ a lot in the Middle East and in India in terms of the resources available there?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. No doubt, UK has great infrastructure. They have a great support system in place, whether it's academies, whether it's the funding pathways, whether it's the talent identification. I think programs, I think it's been great. I think I've worked in those environments, and they have great policies and procedures in place to support the athletes and support the environment of the athletes. So I would totally agree with you over there. But I think if I have to compare that to India, it's far more fragmented. I think your success also depends upon the city you belong to, the surname, the school you've been to, the gender. I think sport is still seen as a luxury and it's not accessible to all. It doesn't belong to all is something that I've seen over here. A lot of talent comes from tribal regions in our country. A lot of talent comes from the villages, a lot of outskirts parts of our countries where there's a lot of immense, great talent that is present. But there is no support to actually tame this talent and actually bring them to the level where they can actually go out there and perform and represent the country. So these systems often do not reach the places and the individuals who need them the most. And that is something that I've seen in India. And even in the Middle East, I think there is progress for sure, especially in the women participation. I've seen a lot of change. But still, I think there's a long way to go in terms of the cultural norms, in terms of the gender norms, in terms of the religion aspect of things. There's still a lot of limitation, and this still limits participation to a large extent. But there is change for sure. There is credit where due. There is a huge change that I've seen in the last couple of years. And I think there's a huge, long way to go in terms of just women going out there. There's so much talent in the Middle East. There's so much talent in India that I see. I think there's going to be some great, great athletes that are going to come out of India and the Middle East in the coming years with the right kind of support.
Can I just check? Well, when it comes down to the education system and schooling, in the UK, the legal requirement is, well, you study until you're 16. Then again, then children will have various different options, whether to continue with education or go into the workplace or do their sport or whatever it is. In India, is that very different at all? What I'm getting at is, because I've come across it a few times where in different countries, some children have stopped going to school at 10, 11, and they've just concentrated and specialized on their sport. Is that something that you've come across at all and noticed?
Yeah, for sure. I have noticed that. So in India, there are a lot of different layers and a lot of different socio-economic background in India itself. So a lot of individuals do have to give up their education because their families can't afford to send them to school, but they are very talented and they get into sport, and that's what they sometimes become the sole breadwinners of their family. And that's where I talk about sport has the power to change lives. And I've seen individuals who I've worked with where families could not put one meal on the table, but their kids went out there and started to perform at a certain level. And today they've changed their whole family's lives and generations to come. So sport does have the power to change lives. And I see that in India for sure. A lot of individuals leaving their studies and going out there and performing in certain levels and actually bringing huge laurels to their families and to the country itself. But another part of it is individuals do study till the time they're 18. And then due to sport and because they've participated at certain levels, they do get a lot of government jobs and they are placed in different organizations due to sport itself. So yeah, there is a lot of different layers and different components, and it is a very complex system over here that I see.
Yeah, the flip side of a young child, okay, they do well in their sport and then they can be a breadwinner for their family, great. But yeah, the flip side of that would be there's an awful lot of pressure potentially on a 10, 11, 12-year-old, and some of them, vast majority, won't make it and they'll struggle and suffer with potentially with their mental health as well, and all this sort of needs to be factored in.
Yeah, 100%. But another side to it is that they have seen so much pressure in their lives. When you can't put one meal on the table, that is pressure. And they've seen their families suffer. So to go out there and actually run and perform and play football or go out there and play a sport, that is fun for them. That is joy for them. That brings so much happiness to them. So that is not pressure. They don't see that as pressure. They see the passion. You see the drive, the love for the sport. And that is fun. That is their happy space, is what I've seen in a lot of communities, also here in India. A lot of layers involved and a lot of different stories and a lot of individual differences.
That's the key in this, isn't it? Individual differences and people respecting individual differences, educating the best they possibly can globally. I guess there and organizations, be it whether it's UK, Middle East, India, is just trying to keep getting better at this stuff and sharing these types of messages essentially. So, look, Gayatri, I've really enjoyed the time here. It's been great to catch up as well. Would you just share 3 key takeaways for the listeners from what we've discussed?
Yeah, so I think 3 takeaways from my end would be taking time out, actually reflecting on what your values and what your beliefs are. People who try and make a career in sport, whether that's behind the scenes, whether that's an athlete, that comes with a lot of drive, a lot of passion. So don't let the policies and the procedures and the politics of sport try and take away from that passion, and don't let that dim your light. So I would just say reflect on what your values and beliefs are, and then try and make a career out of your values, your beliefs, and what actually drives you and motivates you is something that I would say. Secondly, I would say do things the right way, do things ethically, go for the right licenses, the right education. I know it's not always easy. Your countries might not always provide it, but there's always conversations you can have. there are always individuals who can actually support you, network, talk to the right people, get the right guidance, and do things in the right way. And it'll go a long way in your career and the athletes that you're serving and the environments that you're serving and existing in. So I think that is something that I would say. And lastly, believe in yourself wherever you are in the world, wherever you come from, wherever you're going, whether it's a different country. Believe in yourself. Your voice matters. What you bring to the table matters. And I think that's going back to the individual differences again. No one else can contribute and provide what you can. So believe in yourself and go out there and achieve whatever you've dreamt of.
It's a lovely little positive message to end with. So, yeah, no, a big thank you. Whereabouts can the listeners find you? Should they want to reach out to you and have a conversation?
Yes, so I founded an organization in India called Mind Matter Performance. So you can reach out to me. All details on the website, mindmatterperformance.com. Get my email there, my contact details there. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, no, thank you for your time, Gayatri.
Thank you so much, David.
So I thought I'd give my take on this episode, the previous episode, and this series as a whole, really. You know, by listening to these stories, whether it's about cultural norms, whether it's about neurodiversity, whether it's about supporting children, it helps us understand different perspectives. And by doing so, we can start to break down some barriers. We can make sport more inclusive. And really, that's been the purpose of this episode and the recent episodes. You know, inclusion in sport, it isn't just about making sure people from different backgrounds have access to opportunities. It's about creating environments where everyone feels valued, where they feel respected, and where they're able to thrive. And two key psychological skills that support this, in my eyes, are being non-judgmental and displaying curiosity. You know, if we think about being non-judgmental, whether we're an athlete, a coach, a teammate, when we're approached, we can make snap judgments about their ability, about their background, about their identity. And when we do that, it increases the barriers to belonging. Judgments, well, they often stem from stereotypes or assumptions. For example, questioning whether someone is tough enough because of their gender or whether they fit in culturally. These subtle judgments, well, they can lead to exclusion, to self-doubt and disengagement. By suspending judgment, we can allow people to show up authentically, which is essential for psychological safety, well-being and peak performance. And if we think about displaying curiosity, well, it's a flip side of non-judgment. Instead of assuming, curiosity invites us to listen, to ask, to learn. And in a team setting, this might mean being genuinely interested in a teammate's perspective or an athlete's cultural background or experiences outside of sport. Curiosity, it signals respect. It shows others that their story matters. From a performance psychology perspective, curiosity also expands our mindset. It opens us up to new ideas, to strategies, to different ways of working together, which goes on to strengthen team cohesion, resilience, and mental toughness. And when we link all of this to inclusion, when sporting environments are non-judgmental and they are curious, they naturally become more inclusive. People feel heard rather than categorized. People feel valued rather than dismissed. This builds trust, it enhances motivation, and it fosters the kind of supportive culture where individuals can take risks. They can learn. They can push their limits without the fear of rejection. In short, judgment closes doors. Curiosity goes on to open them. And if we want sport to be a place where everyone can perform, everyone can grow, and everyone can belong, then cultivating these two qualities is essential. So one practical thing that I'd like to see more clubs, more coaches, more support teams put in place, it would be creating structured opportunities for storytelling and listening. Why? Well, athletes and staff often do make these unconscious judgments without realizing when they don't know each other's backgrounds. Hearing someone's story, it reduces bias and it builds empathy. So how could a coach go about this? They could build short getting to know sessions at the start of a season or in team meetings where players and athletes they share experiences, challenges, or values outside of sport. They could even be creative in the way that they go about their coaching sessions and perhaps every couple of weeks or once a month ensure they incorporate little things like this into it. And leaders, well, they can model curiosity by asking open questions. Questions like what motivates you outside of sport? And then listening. That's right, listening without any interruption. All in all, if we consider mental toughness in this and we display curiosity and non-judgmental, the athlete or the participant, when breaking down the 4 C's, is more likely to display a higher level of commitment. They'll feel better about themselves too, so they'll be more confident. They'll likely feel more autonomous, so in control. And then lastly, when it comes down to the fourth C, challenge, they'll feel safer to take some risks. They'll be more positive when they are faced with challenges. Some food for thought there. I really hope that you've enjoyed this set of 8 episodes. I'll be having a short break again from the podcast over the next 5 weeks, putting together the next series, which is going to begin on October the 3rd. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions about the podcast, or if you'd like to learn more about sport psychology services. My email address is info@sport-excellence.co.uk. I hope you go on to have a great few weeks. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness Podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.